In general, the armors with armor rating above 100 now also reduce damage on headshots. Victory poses will now only play for the extracted, and burning damage is reduced by 15%. Primary, secondary, and support weapon set changes such as the CD9 exploding crossbow having slightly smaller explosion, increased stagger, decreased number of maximum mags from 12 to 8, an increased number of magazines received from resupply from 6 to 8, has a slight reduction in ergonomics, and muzzle velocity is increased. The last 99 Quasar cannon has increased recharge time by 5 seconds. The BR-14 Adjudicator has full auto and is now a default fire mode, has reduced recoil, increased maximum mags from 6 to 8, increased number of magazines received from resupply from 6 to 8, and is now placed among the assault rifles. For the last 98 laser cannon, it has slightly increased damage and slightly reduced damage versus large volume bodies. The SG-8P Punisher Plasma has decreased maximum mags from 12 to 8, increased amount of magazines received from resupply from 6 to 8, and increased projectile speed but will still keep a similar range. Decreased damage fall off on the explosion is also in place and is placed in the energy weapons category. For the ARC-12 Blitzer, it's increased shots per minute from 30 to 45 and is also placed in the energy weapons category. The R-36 Eruptor has a decreased number of magazines from 12 to 6, and the explosion damage drops off slightly faster. For the last 16 Sickle, it decreased the amount of magazines from 6 down to 3. For the last 5 Scythe, it increased the damage from 300 to 350, but decreased the number of max mags from 6 down to 4. The RS-422 Railgun increased armor penetration in both safe mode and unsafe mode. Staggering force is also slightly reduced. The MG-101 Heavy Machine Gun has a third-person crosshair that is now enabled. The 63 CS Diligence Counter Sniper has damage increased from 128 to 140, and its ergonomics have been improved. The R63 Diligence has damage increased from 112 to 125. The P19 Redeemer has slightly increased in recoil. The P2 Peacemaker increased damage from 60 to 75, and the P8 Senator increased damage from 150 to 175, while Speed Reloader is added when reloading on empty cylinder, which will speed up the reloads on empty considerably. The last 7 Dagger has increased damage from 150 to 200. The AR-19 Liberator has damage increased from 55 to 60. The AR-23C Liberator Concussive has damage increased from 55 to 65. The JAR-5 Dominator has damage decreased from 300 to 275. The AX-AR-23 Guard Dog has decreased damage by 30%. The RL Airburst Rocket Launcher, which was recently added to the game, will no longer detonate when shot near stratagems such as the HMG turret, sentries, and resupplies, as well as other Helldivers. It had also reduced its proximity radius. Moving on to stratagems, we have the AMG-43 Machine Gun Sentry, which had increased health to match other sentries. The ARC-3 Tesla Tower, which has its health increased by 33%, and the FAF-14 Spear had added reload stage after the spent missile had been discarded. In terms of enemies, the Bile Spewer and Nursing Spewer's movement speed has been slightly reduced. The Hulk's force required them to stagger has been slightly increased, and the Hulk Scorcher direct flamethrower damage has been reduced by 20%. The Devastator's fire rate slightly increased, but only for the standard Devastators. The gunship sideways movement has been slightly increased. The Scout Strider Riders are now less vulnerable to explosions. The Fog Generator's health and armors are increased, and gunship spawners now have a much lower cap on how many gunships they can have active at the same time. In terms of enemy patrol, the patrol spawning has been increased where there are fewer than 4 players. So the fewer the players, the bigger the change. For 4-player missions, there will be no change compared to before, while the biggest and notable change will be for solo players at higher difficulties, which see a much larger spawning. In terms of gameplay, they have improved the variation in distance between objectives, such that the objectives will not spawn as far away from each other as often as before. They also added settings in the option menu gameplay section to disable automatic climbing and vaulting when sprinting. The Spread of Democracy mission, otherwise known as Raise the Flag, can now be enjoyed on higher difficulties for maximum freedom shredding. When readying up, Helldivers now salute to ensure maximum democratic readiness. Added ambience to the tremor planetary hazard to underline the severity so Helldivers can react accordingly.
Yep.
And shots that ricochet from heavy armored targets will now properly hit the Helldivers who fired them, so trigger discipline is highly recommended.